I knew nothing. I had no social skills whatsoever, but I was out of the house. I was starved for love, and anybody who'd be nice to me, I went to bed with. And so within a year, I had a baby. And I couldn't take care of the baby. I couldn't take care of me. But I found the child a really good home. A couple who wanted a baby very much and couldn't have one. And so I lived with them for the last 2 months, and I had it in their name at the hospital, and after 5 days I left. And what I did was I went back to my home. I got my mother, and I said, you do not have to take this any longer. You're getting out of here. And we both left. And we were together for almost a year. And then I said to myself, you know, she's okay, she's fine now, she's in good shape. And I took off. And I went to Chicago for 3 weeks and stayed 5 years. And then I went to New York for 3 weeks and I stayed 30 years. And bumbled through life doing the best I could with the understanding and knowledge that I had, which was really nothing. I started out working in dime stores and things like that. And then when I hit New York, life sort of changed for me. And I became a model, a showroom model. And I'd had no education, so it was a very good job for me because I couldn't be a secretary or anything like that. And I did that for many years. I married an upper-class Englishman, which was a very nice experience. And I stopped modeling at that time. And we had 18 rather wonderful years together. And I learned a lot about life. And it was like my social training, because I had no social skills at all, and by the time we were partying, I had learned a lot. But when the divorce came, it made me feel very much like so many women feel, that I was a total failure and I couldn't do it right and everything was wrong again. And it was about 5 years later that I discovered this group called the Church of Religious Science, which was where I heard, if you change your thinking, you can change your life. And that is where my life really began to change. You will have all these speakers. We're all going to say the same thing, really, but we're going to do it in slightly different ways. And we want to, everybody wants to hear things differently. Just because I say something, some of you will get it, some of you will say, what is that woman talking about? But another teacher, or 3 or 6 or 12, can say the same thing that I'm saying in different words. And you go, oh, that's brilliant. Never heard that before.
I was living like a lot of people do, fairly unconsciously, but not aware of my unconsciousness, just kind of going through life and often feeling as though life was happening to me, that I was a victim to what was going on in my life. I was really like living in a comfortably numb place. There wasn't a depth of meaning in my life, and I knew something was missing, but I couldn't name it. We had a tax business. I, as a young girl, started apprenticing with my dad when I was 16. He had a business in our home, and we moved it out to a building. And in my early 20s, our business burnt to the ground. One morning, I got a phone call at 6 a.m. My mother called to say that the building was on fire. And when I got there were fire trucks and police and news reporters, and everything that meant anything to me was in that office. And I had a nice front office with a glass front that I could look into, and now everything was burning.
When I was 12, I was brought to Boston to essentially have my spine completely fused. And I remember looking up saying, I'm going to be a doctor and a scientist someday. And so I became pre-med at a very early age. And so after working as pre-med, I started falling asleep a lot, up to 17 hours a day. They gave me a medicine, and the medicine started knocking out my bone marrow, and there wasn't another medicine that would help. And so I was forced to look for other things. I went to a bookstore in Boston, and I look up at the shelf, and there's this book called You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. And, there were these things called affirmations that if you did them, you're supposed to get, you can heal your life, was the whole point. I did reps, just like you do in a gym. Instead of lifting barbells or whatever I lifted, I love myself just the way I am, 10 times. And after 3 months, I stopped falling asleep, and I was able to go to medical school, which was absolutely lovely.
I myself had terrible migraine headaches. Once a month, twice a month, whatever. I'd been worked up in a Boston hospital, a week there with all kinds of testing. They never knew what it was. At the age of 19, I had to do this English paper, and like most migrainous personalities, I needed to know what it was they wanted of me, and I couldn't figure it out. When I came out of the library not knowing how to get an A in the course, I temporarily thought, maybe I should just throw myself in front of a car. It would be easier than this.
I lived in an orphanage until I was 10, in a series of foster homes. The circumstances at that time were such that my father had walked out on his family, and I was born in the Depression. My mother was working as a candy girl in Detroit, on the east side of Detroit, earning $17 a week. And I can remember a girl named Martha came, and they were dropping her off for basically the same reasons that we were dropped off there. And they said, go find Wayne. And I came and I started talking to Martha. And she was crying and she was all upset and she was sad. And I was trying to convince her that she didn't have to be sad. I remember saying to her, this is a great place. There's no parents here. You can do pretty much anything that you want. I mean, you've got a lot of freedom and we're going to have a great time. And all you have to do is change the way you think. And it goes from being a miserable experience or a tough experience or a hard experience to one that you can do anything that you want with.
In that moment when I watched the building burn, I wasn't thinking about, all of the work that was piled up on my desk. I was thinking about my father standing next to me. I was thinking, thank you, God, that there was no one in the building. And I was also a little too upset about some of the physical items that I was losing in my office. I had more of a relationship with my adding machine than some of the people in my life because of how busy I was. The interesting thing was, this is where the soul is so wonderfully wise and resilient. I remember watching this fire and just being devastated by it on one hand, but there was this little voice that said, this is happening for a reason. You don't know why right now, and it looks horrible, but there's actually something wonderful that's going to come from this. Stay awake.
So I was going to throw away this intuition, throw away this affirmation stuff, because it was something that I needed to get to be kind of normal. I got to my sophomore year and I started really hitting the wall. I was doing an MD and a PhD. So I started blowing discs and stuff, and I couldn't end up going in the intellectual career that I wanted to, being a neurosurgeon, because you can't stand up. So I chose psychiatry because I could sit down, and I hated it. It was boring. But I learned, it's very interesting. All roads lead back to spirituality and intuition.
I go back to my dorm, I call my parents, and I say, I hate it here. This isn't working for me. And my father says, quit. So quit. You can come home. And I changed my mind. And in that moment, I changed the migraine headaches. I maybe had 3 or 4 the rest of my whole life because I changed this pattern. And my perception was, you must do this. And I've really been driven my whole life to get it right. And get it right, though, in the way that the culture, and in my case, the practice of medicine says is right. But here's the problem. Most of what I was taught in medicine about what causes disease is not the truth. I cured my migraine headaches, not with Imitrex, not with Advil. I cured them with a change of perception.